everyone.
All right. Daf Yomi for the month is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Moshe and Susie Feder. Li'ilu Nishmas, Mrs. Feder's father. Simcha Aryeh ben Yosef Tzvi, whose yortzeit was on the 17th of Iyar. We are going to take a little bit of a detour from our topic, which was a detour from our other topic, right? We were talking about Tuma for the first sections of for the first couple of prakim of Shevuos. The last part of the last mission that we had been dealing with hit us with this correlation to Nida, right? To the halachos of Tuma from a woman who is on her period. So that is a separate category of halacha called Nida, and that is where we're going to start our detour today. We had mentioned yesterday, why did we establish this detour? Because Brian wants to know, how did we get here? And the answer is, we got here because the Mishnah said, this is the circumstance where if a Beis Din made an error and taught a halacha that was not correct in this area, so we would not be liable to bring a bull offering. And that is the circumstance of Tuma. Why is that? Because we had said that it's a kind of a side point, but when it comes to these areas of making a mistake, coming into the Beis Hamikdash when you're tamei, the required sacrifice for that avera is korban olah v'yored, right? Which is an offering that depends on how much money you have, which kind of offering you bring. And we've talked about that offering and the types of offerings that is. Now, that is not in standard, right? Normally, when somebody does an avera that if you would do it on purpose, you would get kares, the regular sacrifice for that would be a chatas, a regular sin offering. If Beis Din makes a mistake and teaches that something is permitted that isn't, or something is prohibited that isn't, so then they tell all of the Jewish people and they follow it, so they have to bring a bull offering, which is the sin offering for the community, and they offer it on behalf of everybody.
The Beis Din has been
The Beis Din brings it, that's correct. They're going to bring in a bull offering. The Kohen Gadol brings a bull also if he does that, right? We're going to see that in Masech Harios, this applies to the Nasi. There's one for the Nasi, there's one for a Kohen Gadol, and there's one for a Beis Din. So if a Beis Din makes a mistake and everybody follows, they don't bring their own individual ones. But that korban, that sacrifice that the Beis Din brings is only in a normal circumstance where the avera is a kares avera, that if you did it b'shogeg, you would bring a korban chatos. That means that the averos that we've been talking about of Tuma in the Beis Hamikdash isn't going to apply to that.
So the Beis Din brings the korban on everyone else's behalf.
That's correct. That's what's going to happen. Now, however, in this circumstance, since the korban is a korban olah v'yored and not a chatos, this, says the Mishnah, is the example of the mitzvahs aseh and the mitzvahs los aseh. We haven't discussed what that aseh and los aseh is, but we will today. With mitzvahs aseh and los aseh, that you are not going to have a Beis Din bring a korban for, because it's different because the korban olah v'yored. Then the Mishnah says, hey, and you know what is one that you have to bring an olah v'yored for, that you bring that the Beis Din does bring for? A regular standard case of kares, and a regular standard case of kares is nida, right? Nida is a good standard case. Now, why is nida a good standard case? Well, any real case could do. But it's a good one because it has some similarities of Tuma involved. It has, also the kares is written clearly in those sections. But in any event, Nida is picked as an example of a avera, which is a kares avera that if you do it b'shogeg, you have to bring a korban chatos. That would be a circumstance where if the Beis Din made an error, then the Beis Din would be responsible for that error. Okay, so that's where we brought in this Nida. Now we're going to discuss these halachos of Nida, since we brought them up yesterday at the very end. So now Itmar. So we are, 8 lines up from the bottom. Itmar Abaye, Amar. So it's been said. Abaye says, Mishnei de Reb Chia Barav, in the name of Reb Chia Barav. Chayev Shtayim, right? In the case, or we're going to presume at this point that we're talking about the case of our Mishnah, that if somebody is having relations with his wife, and amidst the relations, right, she says, I am a nida, right? So then, if he doesn't wait, we said that he could wait, right? If he does not wait, and he pulls out immediately, so then he's going to be chayev two for different averos. Okay, so that is what Abaye says. V'chein Amar Rava, Amar Rav Shmuel. This also Rava said the name of Shmuel bar Shva, Amar Rav Huna, Chayev Shtayim. Okay, you're going to be liable twice. So why twice? Chada aknisa v'chada aprisha. Because you've done two averos, or you've done really almost the same avera twice. Having relations with a woman who's a nida, which is the prohibition, and you've done it twice. How have you done it twice? One by entering and one by exiting. So, Haviba Rabba. So Rabba wants to know, hang on a second. You're chayiv twice, which means you're going to bring two korban chatos, right? If you've done this avera b'shogeg, because you obviously can't be talking about maize, you can't be chayiv kares, so multiple. So you're chayiv, you're talking about a shogeg circumstance, you're chayiv twice. So now we need to know, what is the circumstance? B'mai. So let's just describe this term vest. Vestes or vest. This is the approximate time that one would expect a woman to become a nida. A woman's cycle is generally repetitive and can be consistent. So in the context of this Gemara, it's not the precise Vesses, but we're approaching the time when one would expect that she would see her period. So it could be the equal amount of days from the previous period, or it could be the same day of the Jewish month. That could be another example of a Vesses, those halachos of Nida. But let's say you're at this time. So now, he's supposed to be aware not to have relations with his wife at this time. Samach leveses. So now,
can a woman have a period while she's pregnant?
No, not while she's pregnant, right? That is not supposed to be the case. I say it's not impossible, theoretically possible, right? I think that if you, because the Gemara talks about, when we're in Maseches Nida, we'll get into all the potential possibilities of a woman becoming pregnant when she's already pregnant and all of those circumstances. And yeah, they're medical circumstances. It's the short answer is no, but depends. So in any way, ubiman. Now let's talk about what kind of a person we're dealing with. Let's say this guy is a good Talmid Chacham. He's a knowledgeable guy. He knows halacha. Okay? So now, Bishlama Aknisa. Now, he has relations with his wife. We can understand why Lichayev. We can understand why he is Chayev now, because Kasavar Yachoni Liv'ol. He had this idea. He says, you know what? I understand it's the time that my wife's supposed to be a Nida, but she's not a Nida yet. So we'll be able to have relations before she becomes a nida. Now, he should know better and should have realized that it could happen at any time, and he should have been separating from her. But he didn't. So that, we're going to call that b'shogeg.
How would he would be chayev?
Well, we're going to say he's chayev a korban, right? Can't say he's chayev a mazid. Why? Mazid is, I knew she was a nida, and I had relations. That's mazid. Ones is, I had no reason to believe she could ever become a nida. This is a shogeg. I had reason to expect, I should have separated, and I didn't. Okay, he decided to push his luck, and now he's on the hook. He's got a korban he has to bring. Okay, so that's the circumstance. So that's the knisa. That's the beginning of the bia. Okay, now Ella aprisha amay lechayev. The question's going to be when he is exiting. So why should he be held liable? Mazidhu. At that point, he's completely aware of his avera. He's a tamachos, he's completely aware. He knows she's a nida. If he exits, he's chayev b'mezid on purpose. So that shouldn't be an extra korban, right? That should be kares for that part. Okay, so that's possibility number one. Yurchas Madalef. So v'iba am haaretz. So if, let's say, this guy isn't a knowledgeable fellow, he doesn't know these halachos at all. So idi v'idi. So then, let's say both the circumstance where he has relations, and then when she says I'm tameh, he exits. So now he doesn't know the halacha. So he doesn't know that he's supposed to not be with his wife, and he doesn't know that he's supposed to wait before exiting.
Would he ask you? Does he ask you shaila if he doesn't know?
Well, he's in the middle of bia. He's got no shaila, but hopefully no rabbis around to ask, right? so therefore, so now, okay. So now we're going to call him b'shogeg because he's a person who doesn't know the halacha.
Why isn't he nonis?
Because not knowing isn't an ones. Right? Always, if you don't know it's Shabbos and you do an Avera, that's shogeg. Right? That's shogeg.
But if you don't, like a Bali Truba,
that's an ones, right? A person's Tinok Shenishba, we said was different. We were in the Tinok Shenishba is more like an ones, right? We're not talking Tinok Shenishba.
Somebody doesn't even know that there's laws of nida. He doesn't know this law of nida, or he doesn't know, like, he doesn't even know this thing exists.
So that we sort of can make some distinctions. Remember that things that are written clearly in psukim in the Torah, unless you're a tinok shenishba, that shouldn't be something that you don't know. Right? It's almost like you have to work hard to be that negligent. Perhaps you're not. Perhaps you should be liable in that circumstance, right? So in this circumstance, right, this fellow is achal shnei zeisi chelev behelam echadu. This would be akin to somebody who he eats 2 pieces of prohibited fat. Some parts of the animal are of a cow or fats that are not allowed to be eaten. They're called chelev. And those parts of the animal, if you eat 2 pieces, let's say you eat 1, you're chayav kares. If you eat 2, you're not chayav misa. No, you're going to be chayav kares, but you're going to be chayav korban if you do a shogeg. If you eat 2, you eat a big piece, so you're still chayav 1 korban. The only way to be chayav 2 korbanos is you ate, and somebody says, hey, you can't eat that, that's not kosher. Then you eat a second, and then you forget, and then you eat a second time. Then, by knowing and being aware in the middle, then it can become 2 separate korbanos. This guy's an Amaretz. When he started his relations, he was an Amaretz. When he finishes his relations, he's an Amaretz. So therefore, this is just one long relations he's having. It's only going to be one korban also. So what's the circumstance where we can have somebody be liable for 2 sets, for 2 korbanos? So he can't figure it out. The Ella, so rather, that can't be the circumstance. We're not talking about this. Let's talk about the other possibility. B'she'ein samach levesta. So maybe it's an unexpected nida. She's not supposed to be having a nida during this time, but she does. Ubeman. So now let's talk about what kind of a guy we're dealing with now. Let's go back to the possibility he's a Talmid Chacham. So you can't hold him responsible for anything then. Why? Aknisa onus, as far as having relations, he was perfectly legal. There was no problem. There was no reason why he should have suspected anything. So therefore, that relations, there's no korban for that. That's onus, right? That's onus. Aprisha mays it. And then when his wife says, I am Anida, so he's a Talmid Chacham. He knows the halacha. He's supposed to wait before he goes out, and he didn't. Now he's amazed. So he went from being an ones to being amazed. He shouldn't bring any korbanos. If the guy's an Am Haaretz, so then Chadahu D'Mechayev, so he's going to be Chayev once, Aprisha, for the time, because now his wife tells him that she's Tameh, then he's Chayev for the one thing that, because after all, the beginning, he was completely mutter. Only when she says, I'm a Nida, then he's Shogeg, because he doesn't know the halacha that he's supposed to wait. Okay, so then it's only 1. So therefore, we can't come up with any circumstance where we can find somebody who's going to be chayav 2 korbanos, like Rav and Abaye both agreed. So Hadar Amar Rava. So Rava goes back and he says, I'll explain to you. Liolam besamach levesta. We're talking about a case. We had a good reason to expect that she was going to be a nida. Talmid Chacham, and the guy is a Talmid Chacham. He's aware of the halacha. He knows he's not supposed to be having relations with his wife tonight, but he did it anyway. V'Talmid Chacham lezu, vein Talmid Chacham lezu. But he's not so expert in halacha. He doesn't know everything. So therefore, when his wife in the middle of the bia said to him, I'm tameh, he went, oh my gosh, and jumped out of bed, not knowing the halacha that he was supposed to wait. So therefore, so you say, we had the presumption that if you're a Talmid Chacham, you know everything. Could be you're a Talmid Chacham and you don't know everything, right? You're a Talmid Chacham who knows the halachas of nida, but you didn't realize that if you get yourself into that kind of a situation, you should wait. So therefore, he's shogeg for the bia because he shouldn't have had relations in the first place. And then he's shogeg for not knowing the halacha that he should have waited. And therefore, he's going to be shogeg. That's the circumstance of being shogeg twice. Okay. Good. Amar Rava. So now, Rava says, V'tarvaihu teninhu. So he says this concept, this idea that you'd be chayiv a korban on both the beginning of bia and when you're exiting out is explained in different mishnayos, right? So knisa, the fact that you're chayiv when you enter is tanina. We learned in a mishnah. Prisha tanina, and prisha also we do. Prisha. So let's start with the first one. Prisha, the exiting is tanina. Dekatani, as we learned, haya mishamesh imha tahora. Our mishnah. If he was having relations, his wife was tahora. She was perfectly tahora. The amra, and she says, v'amra lo, and she says to him, nit mesi. She feels that she becomes a nida, and she says, I'm tameh. So now, upirish miyad, if he exits immediately, he's chayiv. Now he's going to be chayiv for that avera.
So he has to wait.
He has to wait. That's correct. He's supposed to wait. So that is the Mishnah that tells us that exiting is going to be chayiv. Knisa, having bia knisa is tanina. We learned that nimtza al shalo temeyin. Let's say, so in the Mishnah times, they had extra checkings. We don't have these minhagim to do these checkings. But after Bia, the people would wipe themselves with cloths in order to be able to see, to make sure that if there's blood, that there would be tumah. So he's wiping himself off. If he finds blood on his cloth, so then she's a nida. He is tamei because he's a boel nida. He had relations with a nida. And v'chayav and bekorban, they both had relations while she's in nida. They're both chayav korban.
Check his cloth. See if it was blood from her, basically.
Correct. That's what you're going to presume it was from her. So now we're going to have korban. We're going to be now. They're both going to be chayav korban. Okay. So now my love, isn't this talking about besamach levesta ve'aknisa? So that aren't we talking about here that what's going on is that this is a circumstance where it was close to when she's supposed to be needed. She wasn't yet, but it was close to that time. And this is on that circumstance that they had that because they began to have relations, that is where this isser the korban comes from. Amalei Rav Ada bar Masna le Rava. So Rav Ada bar Masna says to Rava, Liolam emelacha b'shalosamach levesta ve'aprisha. Now, how do you why? In other words, because we're trying to figure out where's the kares from. Where's the fact that this guy knew that he shouldn't have been doing what he was doing? Right? You sort of have to be in a circumstance of unawareness. So the answer is no, maybe not. Maybe this is a circumstance where it's not his vest. And what happened is he was told in the middle of Bia, and it's the same case we had before. He was told in the middle, and he exits, and that's why he's chayav the korban, because he became aware in the middle of the Bia. Now, if you're going to ask me, why do I have another Mishnah to tell me the exact same case? If I already have one Mishnah to teach it to me, why do I need a second Mishnah to give me the exact same case?
Mishnah, you need to get a little more details.
So okay, so the answer is like you would have said, because the Gemara is going to say nimtza al shalah. The Mishnah continues on and says there's a difference between if blood is found on his cloth and on her cloth. If it's found on her, so then Tameim Besafek, now, if the blood is on him, so you know that it came from her, that means it came while they were having relations. If the blood is on hers, she could start bleeding after the Bia was completed. So therefore, so then they are both Tamei Besafek, they're in doubtful states of Tumah, because we don't know if they were in fact having relations at the time she became a Nida. Maybe they already finished. Upturin mina korban, and they don't have to bring a korban because we have a suffix. You can't bring a korban out of a suffix because that's suffix l'chulin l'ba'azara, right? So they can't bring a korban, and they're suffix that they're tamei. Okay, so that's the reason. Now, va'idi deboi misna nimtza al shalah tananami nimtza al shalo, and that's Yehuda's point. The whole point of this Mishnah is to bring up the distinction between what happens if the blood is on his cloth versus on her cloth. That's why they're bringing back the same case that we learned before, that he would be chayav a korban because he found out that he was boel her while she was a nida during the bia. And therefore, we don't have a Mishnah that tells us that he be chayav a korban b'shogeg for the beginning of the bia.
Is she always chayav a korban as long as it's like she didn't know?
She's going to be chayav a korban
because he's the one who could withdraw, right? He's the one who could pull out.
That's correct. That's not going to be her korban, right? The korban for her is that they shouldn't have had bia in the first place if it was samach levesta.
If he pulled it out, was his fault.
Yes, that I would say is his fault. There shouldn't be. It's a fair point because the way that the Mishnah is phrased, they're not bothered by it too much. But the Mishnah's phrase is that it says that they're both chayav a korban is what it sounds like.
Right.
So I don't know. It's a good point. I hadn't noticed it. How could they be both chayav a korban if your point is valid? If it's on the prisha, if it's the pulling out that is the issue, they both shouldn't be chayav a korban. That's an excellent point. Should write that down somewhere and write it into the Gemara editors and find out why. That is a good question. I'd have to look. I'm sure somebody's got a point there. That by itself could prove that what we're suggesting is not correct. But maybe we have an answer anyway, and therefore we don't. That's potentially why we don't address that as a possible answer, is because we have another possible answer anyway.
Right.
So Amar le Ravina le Rav Ada. So Ravina says to Rav Ada, I can't explain it your way anyway. right? So it's not going to, in the end, Brian's point may be valid, but I've got a different answer, different problem with it anyway. Mi motzis leukmo lehahi b'shelo samach levesta ve'aprisha. How can you establish that second Mishnah that you just quoted as a circumstance where it is going to be close to her vest time, right? That it's not close to her vest time, so therefore the korban is going to be because of the prisha, because of the pulling out, not because of the relations in the first place. Veha nimtza ktani. We're going to focus on the word nimtza in the Mishnah. Nimtza means they happen to find blood, right? Blood was found, which means after the fact. Now, after the fact means they didn't know that he was tameh, right? That's the whole point. They're checking their cloths. They realize, oh my gosh, blood, that means we're tameh. Well, if it's the case of prisha, the case of prisha is they're having relations and she says, I'm a nida. That's how they found out she was a nida. Not the blood was found after the fact and that's how they found out they're a nida. So that's what they pick on. Maybe the answer to Brian's question is that's a very good question on the Mishnah. And Brian's point is also a good question on the Mishnah, but maybe not quite as strong as this question. So they pick on this point. Nimtza lebasar hachi mashma. Nimtza sounds like they found out after the fact. After the bia was done, they found the blood, and that's how they figured out that she was a nida, which means that the problem couldn't have been that she discovered she was a nida in the middle of the avera. Whatever the avera they were doing had to be from before in the first place, meaning they shouldn't have been together in the first place because it was samach levest. Right? They were supposed to be separated in the first place. And that would be that circumstance. Now, via prisha meikara kaparishle. If it was an issue of prisha, he knows she's a nida before he does the prisha. That's the whole point. Right? Meikara havele yediyah. He knows before he does the prisha. So Rava, who was being questioned on this, right? He brought this Mishnah as a source, and then Ravina asked this question. He says, Rava says, "Tzayis mai dekama Rabbi." He says, "You should pay attention to your Rabbi. That's a good answer. He supported my answer." So he says back to him, "Hechi matzis. How can I follow that?" He says, "Detanya law." He says the reason I can't follow that explanation of the Mishnah is zuhi mitzvahs aseh shebenida. The Mishnah continues on and says, this is the positive commandment of nida, shechayavin aleha, where you are liable for a korban for a violation of it. Now, v'im isa, if what you're saying is correct, that the avera, because we have two possible choices of what the avera is the avera that he is, that the avera is that you shouldn't come upon your wife while she's a nida in the first place because she's samach levest. You should separate from her. Okay, or is it now that you're having relations? She says, "I'm a nida." You should separate. Well, mitzvahs lo saseh. At the beginning, it's a lo saseh. This Mishnah says the problem is that he violated a positive commandment, an aseh. Positive is when she's a nida, you shall separate. So that's prisha. That's separating after you're already involved in bia. Don't have relations in the first place is a lo saseh. That's the negative. So therefore, if the Mishnah says this issue is that you violated a positive commandment, you have to explain our Mishnah as dealing with the avera of prisha, of separating from the middle of the bia. Does that make sense?
It's gezer darabanan, is it not?
Which?
Is it not like
vest?
Yeah,
the vest. It's a good point. Yeah, we're going to see on the next Amud that it sounds like it comes from the Torah, and it is a machlokas rishonim, whether it's in Isser midoraisa or not.
Machlokas rishonim between Rabbi.
We're going to say it's going to be Ramban versus Rash, but like it's everybody. Like everybody has
the whole works.
Everybody's on it. So it's not, now what the separations actually have to be. Many of those are better. We'll hang on. We'll get to Amud Beis and we'll discuss that. So Amar Lei, so he said back to him, he says, I Tanisa, if that's what you're worried about, that phrase in the Mishnah, so Chaser v'tani hachi. He says, you're right. Then you have what we call a chisuri mechsura. You got to change the text a little bit because you're right. It says positive, but that's not what it means. Zuhi mitzvahs lo saseh shebenida. You should read the Mishnah say, if the reason you're bringing a korban is because you violated the prohibition of don't be with your wife samach levesta shouldn't be with your wife while she's supposed to be a nida. That's the prohibition, and so therefore that's the shogeg. That's why you're bringing a korban here, not because of the prisha, and that solves a problem. Because then you'd be chayev haya mishamish ima tahora will be the circumstance that you would have relations with the Torah. Va'amra lo nitmesi, and she says I became tamei upirish miyad, and you separate out chayev zuhi mitzvahs aseh. That's the positive circumstance of nida. The lo saseh, the reason why you're bringing the korban is lo saseh, is for the beginning of the bia. So therefore, now we have two mishnayos, one on the beginning of bia, one on the middle of bia, of separating from the middle of bia, and that is the sources. Okay, good.
My question is, if it's not during the Vesta time,
right?
It's still b'shoigeg. It still would be if she said I'm a nida.
That part would be, yes.
Right.
But the beginning, the knisa would not be.
Oh yeah.
Right? That part would not be. That's why the vest, samach levest changes whether the knisa is. Right? Once she says nitmesi, then you're right, it doesn't make a difference. Samach levest, not samach levest. Right. At that point, he's shogeg because he didn't know that he was supposed to wait before exiting.
Right.
Right? That's the show.
There wouldn't be two. That's what you're saying. The difference is there wouldn't be two korbanos.
Two korbanos. That's correct. There's no way to get two korbanos out of non-samach leves. Right. Okay. Amar mar. So back to this mar. Pirish miyad. So the Mishnah says we had talked about if he exits immediately, he's chayiv. Now he's liable. Okay. Back to that point. Heichi ovid. What is he supposed to do? Right. What practically?
Keep it in.
Okay. But then what? Now he's still in, so then that doesn't help us. We're still stuck. So Amar Rav Huna says Mishmei de Rava, Noit Etzer Tziparnov Bekarka. He should stick his 10 fingers into the ground, right? Hold himself still. Ad Shiyamos until his aver dies. Right?
Why can't he just continue having relations till he's finished? Like it sounds like
every part of the relations is usher. If he continues having relations, that's also.
Like the Avera is mamish pulling out. Like
no, the Avera is moving. That's the point. Pulling out is bia. Hence moving while you're in is also bia.
That's
the movement. That's correct. Movement is a hana, is pleasurable. Therefore, it is usher. It's not the exiting that's the isser. It's having bia that's the isser. Exiting is having bia. Therefore, you can't exit. Okay, so therefore you have to wait, vitove, and then that's really good for him. If he can do that, that's amazing. Now it's interesting. This noitz eser tziparnov, stick your 10 fingers into the ground. That is borrowed from a medrash from Yosef, right? When Potiphar's wife is chasing Yosef, it says that he stuck his 10 fingers in the ground in order to be able to prevent from being tempted. So that's appropriate message, right? That's appropriate alignment on the topic. Amar Rava says, Zos Omeres, this is to say that Hameshamesh Meis Ba'arayos Potter. Let's say somebody has penetration with somebody who is an erva, somebody he's not allowed to have relations with, right?
That's another problem.
So having relations with somebody who's an erva is in this or kares, right? Somebody has relations with, I don't know, let's say a sister, right? So then it's going to be a erva. However, if he's not erect, right? So then this seems to imply you're putter. Why? Because the solution to the problem of being boel your wife who's a nida is wait till your aver is mace and then you can exit and it's not a problem.
What if you thought it was mace, then you pulled it out?
Then I don't know. Then are you shogeg on a shogeg? Then you're shogeg, right? That makes you shogeg still, right? Okay. De'i salka daitach chayav, because if you thought that you'd be liable in any event, hachamai taima putter, then why exempt here? You waited. Why would you bother waiting? Either way, you're going to be chayiv. Mishum da'anosu. So he says, well, the answer is, because at this point, there's nothing you could do. You're stuck. You got to exit at some point. So now what are you supposed to do? So onosu, if you're...
Wait patiently.
So if you're stuck anyway, keep pirish miyad nami nifter. So then you may as well exit immediately. What's the difference? So the answer is, because onosu. So Amar Abai. So Abai says, liolam ein malach hameshamish meis barayos chaya. So he says, Hanami nifter. So honestly, he says, therefore, that is according to Rava's opinion. He holds that if the person is not erect, then the bia is not usher. It's not bia.
But the problem is, don't you already see that you're not supposed to move? It's a movement. That's the problem.
Correct. So you're supposed to stop.
Even if
stop, and then once the Aver's mace,
it still happens.
so if the Aver's mace, then when you pull out, then that's not bia.
If you pull out, if it wasn't mace, then you're
shogeg. Yeah, if you pull out without being maced, then you're shogeg. That's right. But if it is, then that's and his proof is because otherwise, why are you waiting? The answer is because once you wait, then you've switched over to onus, and you're not chayiv.
So if you become Tama in the base of Mikdash, you have to take the short way out. But if you
hold on
do
to
this,
that.
you have to take the
long way out. That's a good point. Yes, good point. Hang on to that because you're about 8 lines in front of us. I love that. Amarle Abaye. So Abaye says, Liolam imloch. I will say to you, Abaye says that here I'm going to have to disagree with you, Rafa. He says Hashamish meis barayos yichayfis. No, it's not true. Any penetration in any way, even if he's not with an Aver Chai, is going to be an Isser anyway. So the Hacha. So here, my time apotter. Why are you exempt? Then why are you? If you're waiting, why are you exempt? Mishum da'onasu, because you're stuck. So if you ask the question, so then why doesn't he exit immediately? If he's going to be chayiv anyway, why doesn't he just get out as quick as possible? So the answer is, the answer is because you're only responsible for having as little pleasure as possible. So you're right. It's still usher, but the best thing that you can do is have as little pleasure as possible. Therefore, you wait, right?
If you
still
out, if you exit slowly, would that be easier?
No. You have to be able to wait, right? That's the answer. So you have to wait. Amar le Rabba bar Chanan l'Abayi. So Rabba bar Chanan says to Abayi, Im Kain, if that's true, Matzina arucha uktsara benida. So now, why is it that the Mishnah doesn't point out this great parallel that we just pointed out? When it comes to the Beis HaMikdash, we have this quick way out, and we have the long way out. And benida, right? And then we also have nida, the anan b'mikdash tnan, and we only explain it by the Beis HaMikdash. Go out the fast way as fast as you can. We don't mention this by nida at all. Ela mishum delo dami. The answer is because their two are not similar, right? They're opposites. Aruka dehacha k'tzara dehasam, v'aruka dehasam k'tzara dehacha. There, the closer way is better. And here, the closer way is worse. There, the further way is worse. Here, the further way is better. So therefore, Rabbi didn't want to make it confusing by writing the Mishnah, pointing out that these two halachos are completely opposite, and he just left it out.
If it's not too late by now.
Right? He left it out. Okay. Maskif lo Rav Huna breder Rav Nosson. So Rav Huna, the son of Rav Nosson, asks a fun question. Mi Amar Abaye onosu. Now, how could Abaye be the one who says that that somebody is who he has to wait till he has to wait to be able to exit, right? So that is he's onus. There's nothing else he can do. He really should be chayev because it is still usher, but he's supposed to minimize the pleasure, and that's the best he can do. Is that Abaye's point? So then, Alma b'shelo samach levesta kamrinan. We established our Mishnah to be a circumstance where the reason why he's not chayev in the first place, having relations, in the case of our Mishnah, was because it was not samach levest. It wasn't time for them that they should have been separated. And that's what we're talking about. And then we said, you have to wait in order not to be chayev. V'ha Abaye da'amar chayev shtayim. But 1 second, Abaye came along and explained in the circumstance that we were discussing. We said, well, there's a circumstance where you can be liable to there's a circumstance where you can be having relations with Anida and you could be liable to two different korbanos. Well, that means that alma b'samach levestas kinon. That means we must be dealing with a circumstance where you're close to the vest, right? So which is it that we're dealing with? So the answer is ki itmar da'abaye be'alma ditmar. Abaye's point is these are two completely separate things. Don't combine these two ideas together at all. One is Abaye's point that when he was making this issue, when we were discussing this separate thing about having a possible circumstance where you can be responsible for two different arayos, two different korbanos, that is a circumstance. Samach levast, and that's correct. In the Mishnah, when we're talking about is not samach levast, right? There was no Isser in the original Aveira, and then the prohibition is that if he exits without waiting, then he can be chayiv. That's the Mishnah. We look at those. The Mishnah and the other statement about having 2 times relations are 2 separate circumstances. So those 2 things don't go together.
Some of the less has to be deraisa, just based on this, because it's almost like I don't know if you could apply this to, but it's like a grama. Like you don't know.
This Mishnah certainly, the way that things have been sounding, it would be difficult to explain it other than that, because where's the korban then?
Right.
You have to sort of be it.
Right. Like exactly. Otherwise, it's not happening.
That you're saying you're mazed because the answer might be that it's not necessarily a deraisa, but it's a chazaka, and so therefore you have a chazaka. That's something you should be anticipating. So I don't know, but I hear your point. By mine Rav Yonasan bar Yossi ben Lukunya me Rabbi Shimon ben Yossi ben Lukunya. So this is Rabbi Yochanan ben Yossi ben Lukunya, as Rabbi Shimon ben Yossi ben Lukunya. Sound like they're brothers, right? Azhara leboal nida minayin. Where does it say in the Torah that you're not allowed to have relations with a woman who's nida? So he says, Mina Torah. He says, what do you mean from the Torah? He says, where's in the Torah? So Shako Kala Pasuk Bay. So he took a big piece of dirt and threw it at him, because it must be that. Now it really sounds like they're brothers, right? Azhar Labol Nida. What are you talking about? Where does it say in the Torah that you can't have relations with a Nida? Literally says, Pasuk, Vel Isha ben Nidas Tumasa Lo Tikrov. Pretty clear Pasuk. What are you talking? What are you asking me? So he says, no, that's not what I meant to ask. Azhara Lemishamish Im HaTehora. No, I want to know. Where in the Torah is the prohibition that if you were having relations with a woman and she was tahor and it was perfectly mutter, the amra lo, and she says to him nitmesi, and she says in the middle that I am tamei de lo nifrish miyad, and you're not supposed to separate immediately. Minolan, where's that pasuk in the Torah? So as we've been presuming that it's a pasuk, we said there are positive mitzvah, negative mitzvah. We didn't explain where the positive mitzvah, the negative. This from here. Amar Chizkiah says, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Vatihi nidasa alaf. That's not a positive commandment. He said, remember, he said it's nase. The nida should be upon him. Now, what does that mean? The nida should be upon him. Afilu b'shas nidasa. There is a circumstance where the wife is a nida and tehei alav, and you should stay having relations with her. Now that's the opposite of what we should do, right? Woman is a nida that you stay away. No. There's a case when her being a nida means you stay with her.
How's that?
Because you have to wait, and then you can separate afterwards. That's a circumstance, right? Ashkechon asay. So we found the positive commandment. Lo saseh mino. Where's the lo saseh? Right? You bring a korban, you need a lo saseh. Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, Amar Krav says, lo sikrav. Right? You should not, literally means you should not come close. And lo sikrav, you should not come close. The lo sikrav sometimes is nami lo sifroshu, sometimes means don't separate. Dichsiv, because as we will explain, that when it came to Yeshayahu, was giving a rebuke to the people who were doing the wrong things, and they were really chutzpahdik, and they said, ha'omrim kareve lecha, they would say, come close to yourself. And there you see, come close means to separate, right? Stay away from us. Al tigashbi, don't come close to me. Ki kidashticha, because we're going to contaminate you, right? That was their sarcasm. No, don't come over here and tell us all of your holy things, because don't come over to us contaminate. We're not so religious as you.
And so, 6 feet away.
So that was what they said to him. So you see, the word korav means to separate. Tana Rabbanan. V'zartem es b'nei Yisrael mitumasam. Pasuk says you should warn b'nei Yisrael from their tuma. Amar Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia says, "Mikan ashar livnei Yisrael sheyifreshu min yoshosehem samach leveston." That's the pasuk in the Torah that says that that men are supposed to separate from their wives close to their time that they're expected to be nidam. Right? That's the pasuk. V'kama, how much time? Amar Rabba ona. Rabba says 1 period of time, which is a daytime cycle or a nighttime cycle. If she normally has her normal nida cycle is at night, so then you stay away from, then the separation is that period of night. If the day period, if it's during the day period, it's that day period. Now, that literally, the Torah D'Oraisa portion seems to simply say, don't have relations. All of the other separations that we have, don't sleep in the same bed and stay separated and touching, those are all D'Rabbanans. So let's think of it.
You're allowed to be in the same room though?
You can be in the same room, yes. And so therefore, when it comes to all of the other separations that we are practicing, Those are all Durabbanans. That's why we think of it's mostly Durabbanans. The answer is, yeah, mostly Durabbanans. But ultimately, at the source of it, there is a Doraisa element to it as well. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Yochanan's name Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Kol sheinu porish me'ishto samach levest. Anybody does not separate from his wife close to her vest. Afilu havyin lo bonim k'bnei Aaron. Even if he has wonderful children like Aaron's children, mesim, they will die. Dichsiv, as it says, v'hizartem es bnei Yisrael mituma sam. You should warn bnei Yisrael from their tumah. Vehadava benida sa, and then it continues on, and that the separation comes when she is going to be her nida. The samachlei, and then the pasuk really near that is acharei mos, after the death of the sons of Aaron. So you see that the Torah is connecting these two ideas, that separating from nida keeps your children from dying. Amar Reb Chia bar Abba. Reb Chia bar Abba says, Reb Yochanan. Kol porish mi ishto samach levesta. Anybody who separates from his wife close to the time of her vest, havyon lo bonim zacharim, is going to have male children. Right, and that's what we all know that. So it's very good. Pasuk says, "Lehavdil bein hatamei u bein hatohor." You should separate from that which is tamei and that which is tahor. V'samachim right after that, isha kitazria v'yalda zachar. Woman gives birth; she's going to have a son. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, haven lo banim ru'uyin lahora. You're going to have children who are Talmidei Chachamim, to be able to teach. The pasuk says, "Lahavdil ulahoros."
If you do the same thing, could it be possible you could have a girl?
You could have you come in and say it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. But as the Gemara says, obviously for the sake of the world, we need to have daughters. But it is much easier if you're the one who has the sons. Okay. I like my daughter too. Amar Reb Chia bar Abba. Reb Chia bar Abba says, Amar Reb Yochanan. Kol hamavdil al hayayin ben motzi Shabbosos. Anybody who makes havdalah on wine on Motzi Shabbos. Now it seems, we'll see when the Gemaras would talk about havdalah and things, that havdalah got put into wine wasn't like, not everybody was rich enough to be able to make sure you had enough wine for all the things. So you could make havdalah in Shmon Esrei or things like that. So it was a custom that was ideal to make sure that you had wine. So if anybody who was makbid to make havdalah on wine, havyan lo bonim zacharim, is going to have male children. That's a good thing to say. Pasuk says, "Lahavdu bein hakodesh bein hachol," because Pasuk says, in order to separate between that which is kodesh and chol, and then afterwards it says, "Lahavdu bein hatamei bein hatohor," to separate between that which is tamei and tar, v'samachlei, and after that, isha kitazria, a woman is going to give birth and have sons.
This is a different version of Havdalah we're talking about here?
No, this is a pasuk. Well, that's where the psukim in Havdalah come from. But this is in Vayikra, Parak Yud Yudalf. We'll have to be in a kodesh, bein a chol, bein a tamei, bein a tar. Ulahoros es bnei Yisrael. It's called chukim asher diber Hashem biad Moshe.
You had to say like 3 out of 7 or 5 out of 7. I forget what it was that we had to say to do Havdalah. I was going to ask you if it was a mitzvah essay for Prisha. Why was there even a suffix about a korban?
There's a mitzvah asay, and then we also had a los asay.
No, the los asay, but we said 2 korbans before. We said
asay you don't bring a korban for.
Right, asay don't bring a korban, so it shouldn't be 2 korbans.
No, because the los asay of samach levest, right, and the los asay of prisha.
Oh, because they make Prisha seem like if you. Oh, right. Okay, fine.
Okay, so now Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amar. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, "Banim ru'uyin lehora." That's you'll have children that are going to be appropriate to be able to teach. Tichsiv pasuk says, "Lahavdi ulahoros." Okay, so there's a good thing. Havdalah, keeping track of nida. These are very good segulas for having children that will live male and become Talmidei Chachamim. Amar Rabbi Binyamin bar Yefes. Rabbi Binyamin says, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Kol Mekadosh es atzmo b'shas tashmish. Anybody who conducts himself in a holy way when he's having relations, Havyin lo bonim zacharim, will have male children. Shneimar pasuk says, V'is kadishtam v'yisem kedoshim v'samach le isha ki sazria. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer, Amar Rabbi Eliezer says, Hasheret v'nela mimin. Okay, now back to Tuma. It's like, I don't know if it ever goes back to Tuma. Okay, I don't know. Okay, so we have at the end of our Mishnah, we said that you have to know, forget, and then know again. And then we said that actually at the end of the Mishnah, we said that there are actually 3 opinions on the matter. Let's quote the Mishnah. Let's see if he brings it over here. There was Rabbi Eliezer's opinion that. Oh, we're not there yet. Sorry. This is the Rabbi Eliezer's opinion that if somebody forgets that it's a sheretz, if he forgets about a sheretz, so that means the tumah of himself, of the person, then he can bring this korban. But if he
sheretz is withdrawal?
The sheretz is the creepy crawly creatures, right? But if you forgot that you were going into the base of Mikdash, you forgot where the base of Mikdash was, then you don't bring korban olav yored, right? Rabbi Akiva says v'nelu mimenu v'hu tamei is even he's chayav for forgetting about the tuma, and he's chayav if he forgets about the location of the base of Mikdash. That's the machlokas Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva.
That's harsh.
So, where were we? Okay, good. My Beinahu. What is the source of their argument? Amar Chizkiah says, Sheretz v'nevela ika Beinahu. The issue that is of point, that is different between them is something which is Sheretz and nevela. Rabbi Eliezer says, Ba'inan ad yada ibe Sheretz itmi ibe nevela itmi. So Rabbi Eliezer is saying that in order for you to be chayiv your korban olav yored, you have to know what your tumor was. Did you become tamei to a sheretz? Did you become tamei to nevela by touching nevela? What was it?
Tamei to mace.
Rabbi Akiva savar lo ba'inun adiyava. You don't need to know which exact type of tumor it is. Dekevin diyava deitma ba'olam lo tzarich ibe sheretz itmi ibe nevela itmi. You just have to know that you were tamei. You don't need to know which type of tumor it is. Right? Doesn't have to know that. V'chein amar Ula. Ula says, Sheretz unevela ikabeinaihu. Ula says the same thing. The issue is Sheretz unevela. De Ula Rami de Rabbi Eliezer ad Rabbi Eliezer umeshani. Because Rabbi Ula, he contrasted two versions of Rabbi Eliezer and he came to the conclusion which way Rabbi Eliezer held. Mi amar Rabbi Eliezer ba'inan ad diyada ibe Sheretz itmi ibe nevela itmi. Do we really say that Rabbi Eliezer holds that you need to know what the type of tumor was that you became in contact with in order to be liable? So Uraminu, I have a contradiction. Amar Rabbi Eliezer only says manavshach. He's like this: Chaylev achol chayiv, nosar achol chayiv. Okay, we have a Mishnah. We're just quoting the second half of it. First part says there are two pieces of meat in front of him. One is chaylev, forbidden fats. One is nosar, leftover korban meat. Both are aser. He ate one of them. He doesn't know which one he ate. Right? So he is not liable a korban, says the Tanakama. Why? Because you have to know which Avera you did in order to bring a korban. He didn't know whether it was Shabbos or it was Yom Kippur, right? The one Shabbos, Yom Kippur fell out on Sunday. So now he did an Avera and he couldn't remember whether he did it on Shabbos or Sunday. So he doesn't know whether he did it on Shabbos or on Yom Kippur.
But Yom Kippur you can eat. So if he knows that you can eat on Sunday.
He doesn't. Well, it was malacha he did. He did malacha. So now the issue is, does he have to bring a korban? So the Chacham says you don't bring korban because you don't know which Avera you did, right?
Can't Yom Kippur fall out on a Sunday? Is that possible?
No,
it's not. We learned that in the Gemara.
No,
Yeah, we did.
correct.
Rosh Hashanah can't fall.
Lo adu rosh, right? But because Rosh Hashanah can't fall out on a Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday, so then Yom Kippur can't fall out on a Sunday, right?
Sunday,
Right. So that cannot happen. But just I guess theoretically, I'm saying right. It's somehow you forgot whether you didn't remember whether what you did was on Shabbos or on Yom Kippur. So then, or another circumstance, right? He has relations and he doesn't know whether it was his wife who was Anida or it was his sister, right? It was dark. I don't know. Anyway.
Okay, what would you tell the difference with the skin?
Don't ask those questions. It's theoretical. It's theoretical. Okay, so now, Rabbi Eliezer says, Monavshach. Why wouldn't he bring korban? Chaylev acho chayev, nosar acho chayev. Whether it was chaylev or it was nosar, he'd be liable. Shabbos chilel Yom Kippur chilel chayev. Whether it was Shabbos or it was Yom Kippur, he violated it. Ishto nida ba'al chayev, achoso ba'al chayev. Whether it was his wife who was a nida or it was his sister, he'd be chayev. So therefore, this is the contradiction. On the one hand, you tell me that he needs to know what kind of tumah he has in order to be liable for the korban olav yored, and then you tell me here, he doesn't care. You're b'chayev one way or the other, so you're chayev. Amar lo Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says, Harei Omer, the pasuk says, Oho da elav chata so asher chataba. Doesn't the pasuk say you have to know which avera you did? Ad sheyodei lecha b'machata. You have to know which specific avera you did in order to be chayev for a korban. Umishani hasam, and we explain over there, asher chata vehevia marachmana chet kol shehu. So he says there it says any avera. You need to know what is the type of avera that you did. But hacha michti, what does it say over here? Ksiv bechol davar tamei. It says that if you become tamei in any sort of a way, o benevela sheretz tamei lamali. Why does the pasuk then, after it says if you became tamei in any way, then specify the nevela or the sheretz. So shma mina ba'inan ad yada. Even though over there, right, he says asher chata v'hevi, well, the Torah tells me what you did in Avera comes to tell me that any Avera you're going to bring. You don't need to know the specific Avera. That's how Rabbi Eliezer learned. But here, the pasuk goes out of its way to tell me that I need to specify which tumah it is. That's why Rabbi Eliezer makes the distinction. So you see clearly Rabbi Eliezer tells you need to know which type of tumah it is. Rabbi Akiva does not. Okay, so now, for Rabbi Akiva, Aidi deboy lemichtav behema v'chaya. So he says that the pasuk, and this we learned this back on Daf Zion, I think it was. Daf Zion, we had talked about Rabbi that this pasuk said that the word that behema, I cannot remember exactly what the drasha was about, but we had the words were extra because a behema and a chaya sometimes can be used. Those words can be used interchangeably, and the fact that it says or a behema tmeya or a nevela tmeya likede Rebbe, that he learns this drasha, he learns the drush before, so therefore ksiv nami. So here it also says sheretz. Kidetana debate Rabbi Yishmael, he has the word sheretz here is according to the teaching of the Tana debate Rabbi Yishmael that kol prosha shenemra v'nishnis, anytime kol parsha shenemra v'nishnis, anytime something is written and then said a second time lo nishnis ela b'shvil davar shenischadish ba, it's only written in order to teach me the new thing. There's Yehuda's rule again, right? This is the rule when the pasuk repeats itself, even though it's repetitive and doesn't seem to serve any additional purpose, it's in order to add to us this new things. So therefore, right, even though it said in the beginning of the pasuk bechol davar tamei, and then it goes back and it says o benivras behema tmeya, he says that is coming to tell us this extra words that Rebbe uses for his drasha, which I can't remember, but it's coming to teach us that drasha. Therefore, those words are not extra. So therefore, whereas Rabbi Eliezer says those words are extra to tell me I need to know specifically what type of tumah it is, Rabbi Akiva says those words are not extra, therefore I don't need to know exactly what kind of tumah it is. Okay. Kidatana de Rabbi Yishmael, like we learned in the Yeshiva Yishmael, that as we just said. Okay, so now Rabbi Eliezer hi ba my ovid lay. So now we don't worry about Rabbi Akiva, this word ba, because he just said the whole pasuk is no longer extra because it came to teach us Rebbe's rule. But according to Rabbi Eliezer, we have in this pasuk the extra word ba. So what is the purpose of that pasuk? As the pasuk says, "O hoda elav chataso asher chata ba." Right? He has to know the avera that he made that he sinned in it. Well, according to Rabbi Yeshua, he says that you really literally need to know which Avera you did. According to Rabbi Eliezer, you don't need to know literally which Avera you did. So
the only thing I understand is Rabbi Akiva holds when we talk about Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh, not Rosh Hashanah, Regalim, Rosh Chodesh, and Yom Kippur, that you could
don't bring in those korbanos, the goats and things that have nothing to do with this.
No, but it would.
Don't go to the goats. Yeah, go ahead, goats.
Would it not? No, I'm asking, would it not? Because of the fact that he's saying it doesn't even matter what kind of tummy you are. It doesn't matter what you mean. It sounds like...
First, this is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, who says that it doesn't matter. It's only Lushitas Rabbi Eliezer. He's arguing with Rabbi Yeshua, and this is about a personal chatos. When you bring your personal chatos, do you need to know what Avera you did? Or is it suffice that you know you did an Avera?
Suffice you know you did an Avera.
So that's Rabbi Eliezer's point of view, right? Rabbi Yeshua says you need to know specifically which one it is.
I thought it was Rabbi Akiva who said.
Not Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is the one who says that I do not need to know which tumah I was.
Actually, we do hundreds of Averas. How do we remember which ones we did?
Well, then you're going to have trouble bringing your korban, right? You need to know. So the answer is, he says that ba is prat limis asek. This is to tell you that if a person is doing an Avera through what's called misasek, you're not going to bring a korban chatos. What is misasek? You intend to do one action, and through that action, you accidentally do the prohibited act. For example, right? I want to bend over and pick up this flower. It was the one that was already picked from before Shabbos or whatever, and I accidentally pick up the one that is still attached to the ground and pluck it out of the ground. Right? That is misasek, right? Not the action that I intended to do. I do the Avera, but I'm not chayav a korban for that. Right? Not chayav a korban for misasek. For Rabbi Yochanan says, actually, mashmos dorshin ika beinaihu. He disagrees with this whole idea. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, we made this whole thing about how Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva are really arguing about whether you need to know or you don't need to know. He says that's not true at all. They both hold the same thing. It's just a matter of how you understand the psukim, right? He says like this, right? You need to know which tumah it is, even according to Rabbi Akiva. It's just a matter of how you explain the pasuk. It's just a matter of how you explain the psukim. Rav Sheshes machlif Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Eliezer, because Rav Sheshes, when he would read the Mishnah, he often just flipped the shitas. Didn't make any difference to him. Whether he said one was Rabbi Akiva's point of view, one was Rabbi Eliezer's point of view, didn't bother him. Rava may Rav Nachman. Rava asked Rav Nachman the following question: Helam zeh biyado mahu. Okay, let's say you forgot both. Okay, that you were in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, this is according to the Shita in the Mishnah. That according to Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, you're only chayiv if you forget your tameh, but you're not chayiv if you forget that the area that you're in is in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so now, what if you forget both things? So what is it that is the key critical point? Do we say the fact that you forgot your tumah makes you liable, or do we say the fact that you forgot that you're in the Beis Hamikdash means that you're not liable? So which is it? Some are lay. So he said back to him, Harei helam tumah biyado v'chayiv. He says, look, the fact is that you forgot that you were tameh, which is the critical piece. And since you did, you might have forgotten other things too, but who cares? Once you've forgotten the fact that you're tameh, you do need to bring the korban your chayiv. So Adarabba, no, what he's talking about could be exactly the opposite. Harei Mikdash biyado. You forgot the fact that you were in the Beis Hamikdash, which means that forgetting makes you putter. Some Ravashi says, here's the way you go. You take a test. Chazinon, let's make a test. Imi tuma kaparish, harei halam tuma biyado v'chayev. Imi mikdash kaparish, harei halam mikdash biyado upater. He says, at some point the guy realizes what's going on and he leaves. So go ask him. So go find out. What did he remember that made him leave? If somebody reminded him and say, hey, you know you're tameh, and he goes, oh, I'm tameh, and then he ran out, then you know that it was because he was tameh that he left. If somebody said, hey, you know this is the Beis Hamikdash area, and he goes, oh, Beis Hamikdash, and he runs out, then you know it was because of the Beis Hamikdash that he ran out, and therefore you know he's not chayiv. So that's how you find out. So Ravina says to Rashi, you've got a flaw in your plan. Because klum parish mi mikdash el mishum tuma, klum parish mi tuma el mishum mikdash. He says, what did you think? As soon as you told the guy, hey, you're tameh, the guy's going to go, I'm tameh. Why is he telling me I'm tameh? Oh, because this is a Beis Hamikdash. So he ran out because he remembered he's in the Beis Hamikdash. Just the fact that you told me I was tameh reminded me of that. Or you can say, hey, you're in the Beis Hamikdash. He goes, of course I'm in the Beis Hamikdash, right? Oh, I'm tameh. And then he runs out. So you don't know, even though that's the last thing that somebody reminded him of what it was that actually caused him to run out. El Loshnois. He says, rather, that makes no difference. That's not a valid test. So there's no way to know. Taner Rabbanan. Okay, now we're getting to something good, which we're not going to get to the whole time because we're going to stop as soon as our minion comes. How many more folks we need? We need 2 or 3. So,
we need 3.
Okay, 3. Taner Rabbanan, a rabbi's learn. Shnei shvilin. Okay, this is I could say like this is a Brian Gemara. I don't know why. I just like think to myself he likes the riddles. I don't know. You got 2 paths. Okay, path 1, path 2. Echad tamei v'echad tahor. One of the paths is tamei. One of the paths is hard. I don't know if Brian, this is the one that he's going to be thinking about for the next 24 hours. The halach barishon, velo nichnas b'sheni. Okay, so what does he do? He goes through the first path. He doesn't touch the second path. So what happens? He's suffik, whether he's tummy or not. Okay, v'nichnas. Now he goes into the Beis Hamikdash. Chayev. Okay, so now he is liable. Halach barishon v'nichnas. So what happens? Where did I go? Sorry, turn. Okay, so what does he do? He goes into the first path. Yeah, and then he doesn't go in the second one, and then he goes to the Beis Hamikdash. So now he's chayav a korban ola v'yored. Okay, so
He goes in.
I just said it wrong again. Let me start again. I skipped a line. Taner Rabbanan, Shnei Shibolim. He's got 2 paths. Echad tamei v'echad tahor. One is tamei, one is tahor. V'halach barishon. Okay, he goes through the first path. Okay, v'lo nichnas, and he does not go into the Beis Hamikdash. Basheni, then he goes through the second path also. V'nichnas, and then he goes into the Beis Hamikdash. Now, one of the paths is Tameh.
Right.
So he's definitely gone through both paths.
Yes, we chayiv.
So he's chayav. Okay,
Right.
good. So that's
Sure.
perfect. Okay. Now, holach barishon. Okay. Now he goes through the first path. V'nichnas. Then he goes into the Beis Hamikdash. He's of Ishana v'tavel. Goes through the whole purification process. Okay. Now v'achar kach. Afterwards, holach basheni. He goes to the second path. V'nichnas, and he goes to the Beis Hamikdash. So now, what happens? He, for sure, at some point, was Tameh when he went into the Beis Hamikdash. Right? Except that he broke it up in the middle. So now he's chayiv. But Rabbi Shimon says you're potter. Rabbi Shimon says you're potter. Rabbi Shimon and Yehuda
You don't
potter.
know which time when you entered, because you don't know which time when you entered the
Because you don't know. Because whatever you knew at some point, you take a look and go, when he went through the first path, if he had known the first path, that he'd gone through the first path, he'd only know that he was Safek Tameh.
Right.
After the second path, he knows he's Safek Tameh. He's never knows, he needs an awareness that he's Vadai Tameh, and he never has that. Therefore, you're not Chayiv. That's what Rabbi Shimon says, you're Potter. Rabbi Shimon Yehuda says, you're Potter Bekulon, you're going to be Potter in both of those cases, Bishum Rabbi Shimon, and then Rabbi Shimon, and we'll stop here and explain all of that tomorrow.
And it's, yeah.